Pope Francis has passed away at the age of 88 shortly after meeting Vice President JD Vance. So, in this video, I'm going to go over why Pope Francis was so loved, including why I think he's the best pope of my lifetime. I don't think it's even close. And I'll also get to JD Vance's meeting with the Pope, what happened there, and the message that JD Vance put out shortly after the news of the Pope's passing came out, and something Vance linked to that I find to be rather interesting. I'm also going to get to some reactions online because people are just having fun with how ridiculous this whole situation is. Here is a clearly unedited image of JD Vance. This is just what he looks like meeting Pope Francis. The expression on Pope Francis' face. Wow, you look like the memes. Of course, I'm joking. I don't think I have to say that. Maybe for YouTube purposes, I do. This is not JD Vance's face, even though at this point, I think we've all internalized it that it is. But I'll get to some more reactions later on. I do want to get to why Francis was so adored, not just by Christians, but by many. Before I do that, worth mentioning here, as Kylie Chung writes, can you imagine if the Pope had died right after meeting Obama in 2008, like the chain email forwards you would have received from your uncles about him being the Antichrist would be hitting your inbox by the dozen right now. So very true. But because it's JD Vance and not a Democrat, don't expect the same sorts of reactions. But people are having a little fun just because of how insane it is to, right after meeting one of the worst people on earth, you have the Pope pass away. Quite a wild situation. So let me first go over some of the great things that Pope Francis has advocated for. Muse has a pretty good breakdown here on Twitter. I'm just going to pull a couple tweets from this. But includes, actually, I just want to mention, like this image. Like, okay, here's Pope Francis over the years. He looks so much like Jonathan Pryce. So I haven't watched that movie yet. What is it, The Two Popes? But like this, it is insane. I'm not even sure this isn't Jonathan Pryce. Like, I'm sitting here looking at this image, not sure if that's, I could not tell you 100% if that's Pope Francis or if that is Jonathan Pryce. I think that the nose is maybe a little different. But my God, the similarities are crazy. Anyways, back to the important stuff. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was known for his close connection with the poor. Eschewing luxuries, he chose to live in a simple apartment, cook his meals, and rely on public transport, gestures that resonated deeply with everyday people. And there are so many more examples of that. When he first became Pope, he refused to wear the official extravagant red gown, instead opting to wear just a simple white robe. He also refused a gold cross and a Mercedes. Pope Francis decided to live a more simple life as Pope and really continue his connection with everyday people, which I truly appreciate. He also, so in 2013, when he was elected, became the first Latin American and Jesuit Pope, signaling a shift in the Church's focus, breaking a 1,300-year tradition of European pontiffs. He named himself after Saint Francis of Assisi, symbolizing his mission for peace, humility, and care for creation. Saint Francis of Assisi is also the name that I took on when I had my confirmation. I don't consider myself to be Catholic anymore. That said, there are still lessons to be had here, and Saint Francis really speaks to what Pope Francis was all about. Now, his criticisms of capitalism were consistent. So as the Nation writes here, just months after he became the head of the Catholic Church in 2013, Pope Francis condemned the, quote, new tyranny of unfettered capitalism and the idolatry of money, saying, quote, as long as the problems of the poor are not radically resolved by rejecting the absolute autonomy of markets and financial speculation, and by attacking the structural causes of inequality, no solution will be found for the world's problems, or for that matter, to any problems. Sounds a lot like Bernie Sanders, a consistent message of critiquing how capitalism operates, how it has consistently propped it up a few to the loss of the many, and that is a consistent theme with Pope Francis' message. Here's a recent tweet from him. This is back in March. Our societies are too enslaved to market logic, and everything risks being subject to self-interest and the quest for profit. Volunteering is prophecy and a sign of hope because it bears witness to the primacy of gratitudinous, solidarity, and service to those most in need. And again, this is a consistent theme and one that it was good to see the Catholic Church, or at least the head of the Catholic Church, moving towards. Now, it's worth mentioning, he wasn't perfect. So while he did approve letting Catholic priests bless same sex couples, which was a radical shift from where the church was before, still maintained the strict ban on gay marriage. So, I guess it's tough to completely transform what the church is under a singular pope. That said, there was a step in the right direction here, as well as his message to the gay community. So, Pope Francis, to parents of LGBT children, God loves your children as they are. He also called for an end to anti-gay laws and LGBTQ plus welcome from church, criticizing laws that criminalize homosexuality as unjust, saying God loves all his children just as they are, and calling on Catholic bishops who support the laws to welcome LGBTQ plus people into the church. Quote, being homosexual isn't a crime, which was hailed by gay rights advocates as a milestone, the first pope to utter such support for the gay community. And this is in the face of some 67 countries or jurisdictions worldwide that still criminalize consensual same-sex activity. Now, he also stood up for Palestinians. As the nation writes here, a pope who prays for Palestine, responding last September to reports of the bombings of hospitals and schools, the mounting death toll, and the suffering in particular of Palestinian children, Pope Francis bluntly declared, quote, this is cruelty, this is not war. Quote, according to some experts, what is happening in Gaza has the characteristics of a genocide. It should be carefully investigated to determine whether it fits into the technical definition formulated by jurists and international bodies. And of course, later on, the ICC went on to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu for his war crimes. Now, let's get to the JD Vance. All right. So, I don't think there's no audio here, but let me just play this meeting. Very, very interesting. So, there's some reactions online. Pope loses will to live after beating JD Vance. This is, of course, is satirical. That shouldn't have to be said. Pope meets with JD Vance, immediately dies of cringe. Remy writing here, meeting Vance and then deciding to go to the one place Vance could never reach. Great line there. Larry the Cat, if you know, you know. So that is former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss meeting the Queen. The Queen died 2 days later. And we all know what happened with JD Vance. Now, Pope Francis' last act was to give JD Vance a lesson about migrants. So this is something that actually has some history here. As back in February, Francis responded to Trump's plans for mass deportations of undocumented immigrants on an Italian talk show, saying, quote, if true, this will be a disgrace. This is not the way to solve things. In a letter that same month, Francis critiqued Vance, saying, quote, Christian love is not a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups. Vance acknowledged the Pope's criticism, calling himself a baby Catholic and admitting that there are things about the faith that I don't know. So Vance was apparently under the impression that being a Christian is about hating other groups. How do you don't need to, you shouldn't have to need to learn that love is universal. At least that's, if you look at the teaching of Jesus and not the teaching of lunatics, Jesus today would likely be a communist. If communism was a thing back then, I think it's very clear based on who he was, the life he lived, that he'd be a communist. And actually, Pope Francis has also said that. So it's not, I'm not just, making baseless claims here. But regardless, okay, you could say, hey, it's good. Vance is willing to learn and he's not criticizing the Pope for the criticism against him. And sure, that's a positive step, I suppose, considering how Trump and, Fox News has reacted to the Pope. That said, if there's no actual change in action behind the words, then the words are simply hollow. So this criticism continued on. So this is from the recent Pope Francis' recent speech just this past weekend. So in a message read to the crowds by an aide in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis reiterated his condemnation of anti-immigrant positions. Quote, how much contempt is stirred up at times towards the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants, he wrote. Before entering the hospital, the Pope, a staunch advocate for migrants and refugees, had directed a sharp critique toward President Trump over his administration's immigration policy, saying that deporting people who come from difficult situations violates the dignity of many men and women and of entire families. Now, this gets to JD Vance's reaction. So, after learning of the news, he writes, "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. I was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill. I find it funny that he that he has to write this, kind of like say, what guys, it wasn't me. I saw him. He was already very sick. So don't blame me." Writing, "But I'll always remember him for the blow homily he gave in the very early days of COVID. It was really quite beautiful. May God rest his soul." So he links to this. I'll link to the speech below as well, in case you want to read the whole thing. As I said, Pope Francis has been very consistent in his message, and that consistency is also in this speech as well. Things that JD Vance does not advocate for. So Francis, in his speech, said here, "We have realized that we are on the same boat, all of us fragile and disoriented, but at the same time important and needed, all of us called to row together, each of us in need of comforting the other." This is a message of unity, of seeing the people around you as equals and working together, not dividing us, not separating us, not deporting us into El Salvador prison camps, but working together. He also went on to say here, "Greedy for profit, we let ourselves get caught up in things and lured away by haste. We did not stop at your reproach to us. We were not shaken awake by wars or injustice across the world, nor did we listen to the cry of the poor or of our ailing planet. We carried on regardless, thinking we would stay healthy in a world that was sick." Speaking to how we as a society, as governments, ignore the various injustice that is going on, whether it is the issue of how, fossil fuel industry has ravaged the planet and climate change. There's clearly a message about the planet here and a sick planet, whether it's about greed and how capitalism has taken over to the detriment of all else. So that, it's just, I just find it, I don't know. I wouldn't even say weird or bizarre, because these people just don't seem to care at all. They don't seem to internalize the actual message that is trying to be delivered to them by the people that they apparently worship. How do you not understand that this man is the complete opposite of who you are as a vice president? So, anyways, Pope Francis, a great pope, the best pope of my lifetime. Hopefully there are some lessons from the message that he carried out while he was the pope. Hopefully that message is internalized by the people that need to internalize it most.